Hello, hello, boys and girls of the internet. Welcome to yet another late night discussion of Tactics Simplified. Today we're going to be talking about planning your operations and issuing orders to your troops so they know what to do on those operations. All right. This is a subject that you could teach an entire week-long class about, week-long school about, but I'm going to try to keep this video brief and light and just cover the general topics. A quick water break to start us off. High quality H2O, as always. All right. Several acronyms going to be thrown at you today. All right. At the beginning here, we have BAMCIS, BAMCIS. So this is the overarching steps that we take when we're conducting our plan, right? We're going to begin the planning. B, we are then going to arrange for reconnaissance. We are then going to make reconnaissance. Then we're going to complete the plan based on that reconnaissance we had. Then once our plan is complete, we're going to issue those orders. And then on the operation, we are going to supervise that the commander's intent is met during our mission. Wonderful. So when we begin the planning, the first thing we're going to consider is MET-TC, right? Mission, enemy, terrain and weather, troops and fire support available, time, space, and logistics, and then civilians. All right, so to start us off with, mission. Who, what, when, where, why, right? Very simple. Who's going on this mission? What are we doing on this mission? When are we going on this mission? Where are we going? Why are we doing this, right? That why is the commander's intent. Commander wants us to do this in order to allow these other things to happen. All right. Once we understand our mission, we're then going to put ourselves in the shoes of the enemy. So for that E for enemy, we're going to talk about salute, size, activity, location, unit, time, and equipment, right? So this is most recent or last observed enemy activity, a quick salute report on that. We are then going to look at draw D from the enemy's perspective. What is their likelihood to defend and how would they do that? What is their likelihood to reinforce and how would they do that? What is their likelihood to attack and how would they do that? Their likelihood to withdraw, their likelihood to delay. Then we're going to look at their center of gravity and their critical vulnerability. Center of gravity is going to be what they rely on, right? If that was taken from them, they would crumple. They would not be able to continue to operate in the fashion that they do without their center of gravity. Often, their center of gravity is heavily protected or could even be what is their most lethal asset. Their critical vulnerability is going to be where they're weak. Where's the kink in their armor? How can we exploit them, right? Identify their critical vulnerability and identify how you can exploit that critical vulnerability. All right, so if I was talking about the Russian military, right, their center of gravity would be their manpower in numbers and their historically, their use of armor, tanks and troop carriers and heavy mounted weapons on those armored vehicles. Their critical vulnerability is lack of small unit leadership out in the field. So if we can act in a way that they do not expect, then they will be unable to rapidly adjust to that unexpected action. So that would be their critical vulnerability, their lack of small unit leadership. All right. Once we've identified all of that, we're then going to look at MLCOA, enemy's most likely course of action. Another one that's not on here, but is often talked about, is enemy's most dangerous course of action. I think that the Marine Corps removed that one because it would always get kind of outlandish. Like enemy's most dangerous course of action would always be that, you know, they've banded together with China and Russia and nukes are sent upon us somehow. But so you want to look at the enemy's most likely course of action, what you actually think they would do, put yourself in their shoes, and then keep it realistic, but spice it up a little bit. If they, you know, had a little bit more than you thought, if you fucked up a little bit, what would be their most dangerous course of action? And thinking about their most likely and their most dangerous, you'll be able to better adjust your plans to take into account what you expect the enemy to do. Wonderful. So that sums us up for enemy. Then we would move down to the T in MET-TC, which is terrain and weather. And then we get Okokokoa, right? Obstacles and how difficult it will be to move throughout that terrain. Avenues of approach through that terrain and how we can use them or avoid them, depending on what the situation is. Key terrain, how we can occupy that key terrain, or if the enemy is occupying it, how we can avoid it. And then observations and fields of fire, cover and concealment, and then weather considerations. Okokokoa. All right. Then we have T in MET-T, the second T, troops and fire support, right? Who are we going to have with us? Friendly units, right? How much firepower, how much manpower are we going to have with us on this mission? Then we're looking at time, space, and logistics, right? How much time do we have on the mission? How much time do we have before we go on the mission? How much space do we have in the vehicles if we're taking vehicles, right? That's going to dictate how many people we can take and how much equipment each person can take. And then any other logistical considerations, batteries, water, food, whatever the case may be, depending on your specific mission. And then last but not least, C for civilian considerations, right? Civilians, are they about? Do they like you? Do they not like you? How do you deal with them? Etc., etc., etc. All right, that covers MET-TC. Once you have done, you begin the planning and you go over MET-TC, you are then ready to issue a warning order, right? So either you think of an idea or you get told you have something to go do. You go to, you know, your bunk, your rack, your room, and you figure all this MET-TC out here, all this, and then you, based off this planning you did, you issue a warning order to your troops. Hey, everybody, I'm not done finalizing the planning yet, but here's what I got so far. And you give them this MET-TC information so that they can use the time available to begin planning, packing their bags, checking their mags, making sure their weapons good to go, etc., 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 filling up their water bottles and canteens, right? You don't want to just spring it upon your men last minute, 5 minutes before you're supposed to be out the door. Hey, by the way, we're about to go on a mission. Get ready. You want to give them as much time as possible for them to get ready, right? So we bang out this initial planning stage, issue a fragmented warning order to our troops so they can begin getting themselves ready. Then we move into arranging for the reconnaissance, figuring out what kind of recon we're going to do, if we're going to actually be able to do a physical recon or if we can only do a map recon, etc., etc. Then we're going to conduct that reconnaissance, possibly go on a leader's recon of the objective or check on drone footage or whatever the case is, right? Then, based on that reconnaissance we've made, we're then going to complete the planning, right? So if we have to make any adjustments on our MET-TC based off what we saw in that reconnaissance, we will do that. Once our planning is complete, we will then issue the order, which is an incomplete art within itself, right? Planning is one thing, and then issuing the order is a whole nother thing, right? So down here under issuing the order, we're going to want to have an orientation. Depending on the logistical and the time constraints, perhaps this is just going to be over a two-dimensional or a digital map. It's nice if you have a three-dimensional terrain model built. The military is very, drills that you have to have a terrain model, If you can do it, I think it's advantageous. And you want to orient everybody onto that terrain model. This is north. This is the main road. This is where we're at. This is whatever. All the land features and the key pieces of terrain that everybody knows, orient them so everybody understands where everything's at while you issue your order, and you can actually physically move things throughout that terrain model or across that map, that two-dimensional map, as you're issuing the order to demonstrate how things are going to go. Okay? So we then, OSMIAC is another one, right? Or that's how we issue orders: orientation, situation, mission, execution, administration and logistics, command and signal. All right. So we have orientation to begin with. Then we're going to move into situation. Again, this is when we're explaining to our troops, we're issuing the final order, right? So we're going to go over the enemy forces. We're going to go over salute. We're going to go over draw D, their center of gravity, their critical vulnerability, and their most likely course of action. We're then going to go over friendly forces we have available to us, units that are above us. Adjacent to us means units that are in the area of operation that we possibly could call for help, or we might see them, they might see us, but they aren't necessarily tasked to accomplish the same mission that we are. And then supporting units are units that are directly attached or conjunct to us that are supporting us in this mission that we're conducting. All right, and then attachments and detachments, those are attachments and detachments to our specific unit, right? So again, friendly forces above us, friendly forces next to us, friendly forces helping us, people that are actually being added to or taken away from our squad. All right, or whatever the size this is, our squad, our platoon, our company, et cetera, et cetera. All right. That's situation, right? Enemy forces, friendly forces, our specific unit situation. Then we're going to move to M, mission. Again, that's going to be the who, what, when, where, why. Who's doing this? What is it that we're doing? When are we going to go do it? Where are we doing it? Why are we doing it? That why is commander's intent and in order to. E for execution. All right. We're going to retouch on that commander's intent for the execution. We are then going to go over concept of the operation, right? So that is where we are actually talking about you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do the other. Then we're going to go over special tasks, right? Team 1, you have this task. You're the support by fire. Team 2, you're the assault. Team 3, you are going to be the casualty collection team. Team 2, when we're all said and done, you're going to be the enemy prisoners of war team. Team 3, when we're all said and done, you're going to be the information, whatever the acronym, CCS or whatever. Play the cops, take any evidence, look for any maps, any radios or radio frequencies, et cetera, right? Conduct intelligence gathering from the enemy upon completion of the mission, et cetera, without getting into the weeds. Whatever the special tasks before, during, or after the operation you have, you're going to assign them to specific teams or squads or individuals. Now is that time. Then you're coordinating instructions, right? So going over, that's like a whole different topic in itself. Going over phase lines, going over checkpoints, going over things like that, right? Going over the nitty gritty of the map work of what's going on in our execution phase. All right, then administration and logistics. The 5 Bs: beans, bullets, bandages, batteries, and bad guys, right? Food, ammunition, medical, fuel, and for the most part on the assault and stuff, actual batteries. And then bad guys, we're talking about enemy prisoners of war. Can we take them? How do we do that? What do we do with them? Who's watching them? Where are we sending them? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then C, in command and signal, we are going to have, for signal, we're not only going to have our radio frequencies, primary, secondary, and alternative. We're also going to talk about our visual communication plans, whether that's smoke, whether that's flags, whether that's glow sticks, whether that's buzz saws, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't a video on signaling, right? That would be, so we have our radios, we have our secondary visual signal plan. I'm spacing out. Challenge and pass, which is, I need to do a whole video on that as well. Challenge and pass is, right, if you saw Band of Brothers, they say flash thunder to each other. They know that they're not Nazis. They don't shoot each other. Challenge and pass is words you could say to one another that you will let you know you're friendly or not friendly, right? These can either be words, right? It could be whatever, cheeseburger, hot dog, and you want to use them in a sentence, right? You could, so my favorite, hey Bill, my favorite food's cheeseburgers. And then whoever that fuck that is you hear off in the shadows, they go, oh man, mine's hot dogs. My favorite food's hot dogs. And then you know, oh, okay, that's a friendly dude. But if he says, yeah, I love pickles on my burger, well, that's not a fucking friendly dude. Light him up, right? You also can do numbers adding up, right? Numbers adding up to 10 or whatever. Numbers adding up to 5. Numbers adding up to 12. We'll just stick numbers adding up to 10. So then I would go, man, did you see those 7 cats? And then the response could be, no, I only saw 3 of them. 7 plus 3 equals 10. He's friendly. If I say, did you see those 7 cats? And then whoever the fuck that was off in the shadows says, no, I didn't see any of them. He didn't give me the proper number in response. He's not friendly. Light him up. So that's challenge and pass. And you also usually do a running, which the example I gave, flash and thunder, is that, right? A word you would say if you were like sprinting towards friendlies and you didn't have time to do all that dialogue. You could just say whatever, right? Bugs Bunny, Bugs Bunny, Bugs Bunny. And then everybody knows, oh, that's friendly. That's our running, right? So you have your primary, your 2 words, put them in a sentence. You have your numbers adding up to whatever. Numbers adding up to 10, numbers adding up to 20, numbers adding up to 12. And you would put those in a sentence, and then you have your running, challenge, and pass for somebody that doesn't have time to do that dialogue. All right? And then in command, we're going to go over who's in charge, where they're located, and the succession of command. Who's in charge after the leader dies, who's in charge after that guy dies, all the way down to the last handful of new dudes, who's left in charge of them for their bonsai bayonet charge. All right. And then once you've issued that order, you're going to go out on your operation and you're going to supervise your troops accomplish their tasks, completing the greater acronym of BAMSIS. Wonderful, boys and girls. We went over about 42 acronyms today, and we covered a lot of really big topics really fast, but I think this gives you a good overview, a good general idea of how you can conduct your operations, right? What sort of things you need to be considering when you are planning a combat operation.